I inherited the photograph from my grandmother's estate, tucked inside a leather-bound album that smelled of lavender and thyme. Most of the images were what you'd expect. Faded family portraits, vacation snapshots from the 1950s. My grandfather in his Navy uniform. But this one was different. Older. Much older. The photograph showed a classroom full of children, maybe 30 or so, seated at wooden desks in neat rows. They wore the high collared shirts and dark dresses, typical of the late 1800s. Behind them, 3 large chalkboards covered the wall, filled with cramped handwriting I couldn't quite make out. The lighting was dim, probably from the large windows visible on the right side of the frame. And the overall sepia tone gave everything a dreamlike quality. On the back, in my grandmother's careful script, was written, Grandma Marian's Schoolhouse, 1870. Find the extra child. I stared at those last 3 words for a long time. Find the extra child. It felt like the beginning of one of those optical illusion puzzles. Count the faces, spot the hidden figure. But the longer I looked at the photograph, the more uneasy I became. There was something about the way the children were arranged. The way some of them looked directly at the camera, while others stared off to the side, but felt deliberately composed. Staged, almost. My grandmother had died 6 months earlier, but 93. Her mind sharp until the very end. She'd been a retired schoolteacher herself, obsessed with genealogy and local history. If she'd written that note, she'd meant something by it. I scanned the photograph at high resolution and opened it on my computer, zooming in on different sections. The children's faces emerged in greater detail, some smiling slightly, others solemn, a few looking distinctly uncomfortable. I started counting. Front row, left to right, left to right. 7 children. Second row. 9 children. Third row. 8 children. Back row. 8 children. 32 total. I counted again to be sure. 32 children in the photograph. That's when I remembered the second part of my inheritance, a banker's box full of my grandmother's research materials. She'd been compiling a family history for decades, and I'd barely glanced at it during the estate sorting. Now I pulled it down from the shelf and started digging through yellowed papers, photocopied census records, and hand-drawn family trees. Near the bottom, I found a manila folder labeled Marian Blackwood, Oak Ridge School. My great-great-grandmother. I'd heard stories about her. She'd been a teacher in rural Pennsylvania, never married, died young of typhoid fever. But I'd never seen any documents about her work. Inside the folder was a class roster, dated September 1870, written in beautiful copperplate handwriting. Miss Marian Blackwood's primary class, Oak Ridge School. 31 names followed, each with a neat checkmark beside it. At the bottom of the page, a note. Complete enrollment as of September 15, 1870. 1 student withdrawn, October 3rd, deceased. That name had been crossed out, but I could still read it. Thomas Merritt, age 8. I looked back at the photograph. 32 children. But the roster listed only 31 students. And one of those had died before the school year properly began. My hands felt cold despite the warm afternoon. I started searching for more information about Thomas Merritt, but my grandmother's files contained nothing else. I turned to the internet, searching historical records and genealogy databases for Oak Ridge, Pennsylvania. The town itself had largely disappeared, absorbed into a larger municipality in the 1950s. But the County Historical Society had digitized some old records. I found the Oak Ridge School mentioned in several documents, including a newspaper article from October 1870. The headline read, "Tragedy strikes local school. Young student perishes." The article was brief, written in the formal style of 19th century journalism. The community of Oak Ridge mourns the loss of Thomas Merritt, age 8, son of Mr. and Mrs. Jacob Merritt of the Old Post Road. The boy was discovered deceased in his family's barn on the morning of October 3rd. Dr. Samuel Henderson determined the cause of death to be accidental suffocation, though the circumstances remain unclear. Young Thomas had been a student at the Oak Ridge School under the instruction of Miss Marian Blackwood. The funeral service will be held at the Methodist Church on October 5th. The family requests privacy during this difficult time. I felt my stomach tighten. Thomas Merritt had died on October 3rd. The class photograph bore no date on the back, but if it was taken during the 1870 school year, it could have been taken before or after his death. I zoomed in on the photograph again, examining each child's face more carefully. Most of them looked like typical school children, some bored, some curious, some stiff with the formality of being photographed. But one boy in the third row, slightly left of center, looked different. His face was paler than the others, almost luminous in the dim lighting. His clothes seemed slightly out of focus, as though he'd moved during the long exposure. But the rest of him was perfectly still. And his eyes, those dark, hollow eyes, weren't looking at the camera like most of the other children. He was looking down, at his desk, at his hands folded there, as if he didn't want to be seen. I spent the next week becoming obsessed with that photograph. I had it professionally analyzed by a photography expert who specialized in 19th century images. She confirmed it was an authentic albumen print from the 1870s, showing no signs of manipulation or double exposure. "There's one odd thing," she said, pointing to the boy I'd been fixating on. "See how the light falls on him? It's different from the children around him, almost like he was lit from a different source, or photographed at a different time. But there's no evidence of composite work. The emulsion is continuous. It's all one image." "Could it be a trick of the development process?" I asked. She frowned, adjusting her magnifying glass. "Possibly. Early photography had all sorts of quirks. But this is unusually distinct. And there's something else." She pointed to the area around the boy's desk. "See this shadowing? It's heavier here. Darker. Almost like there's less of him, somehow. Less physical presence being recorded by the camera." I thanked her and took the photograph home, my mind racing. That evening, I started searching for more information about the Oak Ridge School itself. The county archives had some records, including a disturbing notation from the school board minutes dated October 10th, 1870. Discussion held regarding Miss Blackwood's request for spiritual counsel. The board finds no evidence of wrongdoing, but recommends the schoolhouse be blessed by Reverend Williams as a precautionary measure. Miss Blackwood's concerns about unusual attendance are noted, but not substantiated. unusual attendance. I found more records. Letters from Marian Blackwood to the school board. Her handwriting growing increasingly frantic. I must insist that someone investigate the matter of the 32nd child. Each morning when I call roll, 31 students answer. But when I turn to the board, I can see 32 reflections in the window glass. When I count the lunch pails, there are 32. When I collect the slates at day's end, there are 32, though one is always blank. The school board's response was dismissive. Miss Blackwood is advised to rest and recover her nerves. The strain of teaching has perhaps proven too taxing. A substitute will be arranged if necessary. But Marian didn't stop. In November 1870, she wrote directly to Thomas Merritt's parents. I know you will think me mad, but I must speak the truth. Your son has not left us. Each day he sits in the third row, fourth desk from the left. He never speaks. He never moves. But he is there. I can feel him. The other children sense it too. They avoid that desk. They whisper about the cold spot near the windows. Please, I beg you, allow me to arrange for a proper blessing, or a medium, or something to help him move on. He seems so lost. There was no record of a response from the Merritts, but I found Thomas's death certificate, and something about it made my blood run cold. Cause of death: asphyxiation by unknown means. Location: family barn, found in the loft. Additional notes: child discovered with schoolbook clutched in hands. No signs of struggle. Door barred from outside. Barred from outside. I sat back, my heart pounding. Thomas Merritt hadn't died accidentally. Someone had locked him in that barn. But who? And why? I kept digging, finding fragments of the story in old newspapers and court records. The Merritt family had been involved in a property dispute with their neighbors, the Coopers. There had been accusations of theft, vandalism, escalating tensions. Then, suddenly, after Thomas's death, the Merritts had moved away, sold their farm, and disappeared from the county records entirely. No charges were ever filed. No investigation completed. Just a dead boy, and a family driven away by grief or guilt. And Marian Blackwood, my great-great-grandmother, left alone in that schoolhouse with 31 living students and one who wouldn't leave. I found her final letter to the school board, dated December 1870. I can no longer teach in this place. The child in the third row has begun to move. At first, it was only his head, turning slowly to watch me during lessons. Now his mouth moves, forming words I cannot hear. Yesterday I found writing on the slate at his desk. Help me. I do not know how to help him. I do not know how to make him understand that I cannot undo what was done. I am resigning my position, effective immediately. Marian Blackwood left teaching and died 2 years later, at age 24, of typhoid fever. But I found something else in my grandmother's files. A journal, fragile and water-stained, that Marian had kept during those final months. The entries were brief. Frightened, November 3rd,
He was there again today. Clearer this time. I can almost see color in his cheeks, though he has been dead a month. November 15th. I tried speaking to him after dismissal. Asked what he needed. The temperature in the room dropped so suddenly. My breath frosted. The window glass cracked. December 1st. He knows I cannot help him. Today he pointed toward the door, toward the woods beyond the school, toward the Cooper farm. I understand now what he wants. He wants someone to know the truth. December 10th. I told the constable what I suspect. He laughed at me, called me hysterical. But I know what I know. Thomas Merritt was murdered, and the boy who did it still walks free. Still sits in the back row of my classroom, very much alive, while Thomas sits in the third row. Very much not. The journal ended there, but in my grandmother's notes she'd written, James Cooper, age 12, student at Oak Ridge School in 1870, convicted of assault in 1875, disappeared in 1880, presumed drowned, body never found. I sat in my quiet apartment. The photograph spread before me on the desk, and I counted the children again. 32 faces staring back across more than a century. 31 who had lived, grown up, died in their time. And one who had been trapped there, unable to leave, unable to rest. I looked at the boy in the third row again, pale, indistinct, looking down at his folded hands. And I realized he wasn't looking at his hands at all. He was looking at something written on his desk, something the camera had been too primitive to capture clearly. I enhanced the image as much as I could, adjusting contrast and brightness until the wood grain of the desk emerged. And there, scratched faintly into the surface, it was James. 2 words, carved by a dead child's desperate fingers into wood, recorded by accident in an old photograph, waiting nearly 150 years for someone to see them. I don't know what to do with this knowledge. James Cooper died over a century ago. Thomas Merritt died even longer ago. There is no justice to be served, no crime to be solved, no wrong to right. But I keep the photograph on my desk now, properly preserved in archival materials. And sometimes I look at it and whisper, I know. I see you. I know what happened. Because Marian Blackwood was right. Thomas Merritt never left that classroom. Even now, frozen in that old photograph, he sits in the third row, waiting for someone to understand, to believe. The other children in the photograph lived their lives. I've traced many of them through census records and obituaries. They grew up, married, had children of their own, and died natural deaths. All except Thomas, who remains 8 years old forever, sitting at his desk, marking himself present in a classroom that no longer exists in a school that was torn down in 1923. I've visited the site where the Oak Ridge School once stood. It's a public park now, with a small historical marker noting that a one-room schoolhouse operated there from 1852 to 1923. No mention of Marian Blackwood.
no mention of Thomas Merritt. But I brought the photograph with me and stood in the approximate location where that third-row desk would have been. The day was warm, but that spot felt noticeably colder. The grass seemed thinner there, as though something prevented it from growing quite right. I placed my hand on the ground and whispered the words Marian Blackwood never got to say. I believe you. James Cooper killed you. And I'm sorry no one helped you. I'm sorry you were forgotten. The wind shifted slightly, rustling through the trees at the park's edge, and just for a moment, I felt something like relief in the air, something like a long-held breath, finally released. When I got home and looked at the photograph again, I counted the children one more time. 31. The boy in the third row was gone. I've shown the image to other people since then, and they all count 31 children, matching the school records exactly. When I point to where Thomas used to sit, they see only an empty desk, pushed slightly to the side. But I have the original scan, the one I made before I visited the site. And in that version, he's still there. Pale, indistinct, looking down at his message, carved into the wood. Sometimes I wonder if Marian Blackwood knew, somehow, that I would be the one to find this photograph. If that's why my grandmother kept it, preserved it, wrote that cryptic note on the back. Find the extra child. I found him. And maybe, finally, he found peace. But late at night, when I look at that photograph, I can't help but think about all the other old classroom photos in attics and archives around the world. All those faces staring out from history, captured in silver halide and paper, frozen in moments they can never leave. And I wonder how many of them are counting wrong. How many show 32 students when there should be 31? Or 18 when there should be 17? How many contain children who never left, who are still sitting at their desks, still waiting for someone to notice, to believe, to help them finish the lesson they never got to complete? The photograph sits on my desk now, properly documented and preserved. 31 children, looking out from 1870, captured in a moment of ordinary school life. But I keep the enhanced image too, the one that shows what was really there. Because some things need to be remembered, even when they make us uncomfortable. Especially then. Thomas Merritt was 8 years old when he died. He loved school, according to the few records I found. He wanted to learn, to grow up, to have a life. Instead, he got trapped in a moment, a photograph, a classroom that existed long after the building itself turned to dust. But not anymore. Now, when I look at that empty desk in the third row, I choose to believe that Thomas finally got to leave. That somewhere beyond the frame of that old photograph, beyond the limitations of silver and paper and time, he's finally 8 years old and alive again, running through fields that exist in whatever gentle place awaits children who die too young and too unjustly. And maybe Marian Blackwood, my great-great-grandmother who died believing herself a failure, who couldn't help the ghost in her classroom, finally knows that she succeeded after all. just not in the way she expected. And not for more than a century. But time means nothing to the dead. And the truth, once witnessed, can never be forgotten. I found the extra child, and in finding him, I let him go.